Our country is going to hell. The critical job of institutions such as Heritage is to lay the groundwork, and Heritage does such an incredible job. This is a great group, and they're going to lay the groundwork and detail plans for exactly what our movement will do and what your movement will do when the American people give us a colossal mandate to save America, and that's coming.
Trump's efforts to feign ignorance when it came to Project 2025 and the Heritage Foundation already weren't going well because the evidence of links between the former Republican president and the conservative operation were everywhere. But then he named J.D. Vance as his running mate.
I want to thank especially Kevin Roberts and all of the Heritage Foundation for 50 years of incredible work on conservative policy. The old famous story, of course, is that when Ronald Reagan took over, he went to the Heritage Foundation to identify all the things. How could he translate his campaign promises into reality? And I really believe that we are on the forefront of a new conservative majority in this country, and we are going to hopefully in 2024 take back the White House, and this organization is going to play a major role in helping us figure out how to govern at the White House, at the Senate, at the House, and all across our great country. So, Kevin, thank you for your leadership, and thanks for being at the forefront of the things that matter.
Trump has said in the past, though, that he's moderated his comments since, that he has no idea who's in charge of Project 2025, and he didn't even know what it was. But Project 2025 and Donald Trump are inseparable. At least 140 Trump administration alumni helped create this document. Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, wrote the foreword of an upcoming book authored by the architect of Project 2025, its new leader, Kevin Roberts. Today, we learned that publication of that book has been conveniently delayed until a week after the election. And tonight, the Washington Post reports that in April 2022, Donald Trump shared a 45-minute private flight with Roberts en route to a Heritage Foundation conference where Trump said in a keynote address, quote, "The group's policy proposals are going to lay the groundwork and detail plans for exactly what our movement will do," end quote.
J.D. Vance has not only spoken at the Heritage Foundation Summit, but he wrote the foreword of Kevin Roberts' book, Roberts being the founder of the Heritage Foundation. As you just heard, the book's release has been postponed until after the election this year, and I can't imagine why. And Trump's attempts to distance himself from the whole thing haven't been successful because the Heritage Foundation has, by its own admission, been advising Republican presidents and dictating Republican policy since the early 80s. This is known information. According to Project 2025 founder Kevin Roberts, the truth is, since President Ronald Reagan took office in 1981, the Heritage Foundation has published a new mandate for leadership every 4 years to serve as a stockpile of conservative policy recommendations from which our leaders can pick and choose. Speaking of mandates for leadership, the Trump administration had one for the 2020 presidential term, and Mark Meadows, who was serving as Trump's chief of staff at the time, said that it would be the blueprint for Trump's second term. Thankfully, that second term never happened. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Rick Scott was honored to be a part of the Project 2025 launch, and he's exactly the kind of guy you'd expect to be honored by such a thing.
Let me speak about the radical left. You and I have both been parts of faculties and faculty senates and understand that the left has taken over our institutions. The reason that they are apoplectic right now, the reason that so many anchors on MSNBC, for example, are losing their minds daily is because our side is winning. And so I come full circle in this response and just want to encourage you with some substance that we are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
The one group that cares about two things is Heritage. They actually really care about good policy, and they really push good policy. They bring up good policy. They promote good policy. They help you move good policy along. They work with your office. They do an unbelievable job with policy.
And yet another link between Trump and this project that he claims to know nothing about. Back in April of last year, the Heritage Foundation held a launch event for its now infamous Project 2025. In the letter read to attendees, Rick Scott said this.
Before we get on with the show, I'd like to just read briefly a letter we received from our U.S. Senator Rick Scott, who couldn't be here with us but wrote a letter that reads as follows. It is my honor to join the Adam Smith Center for Economic Freedom at Florida International University for the launch of the Presidential Transition Project. to promote economic and individual freedom in the United States. Thank you for encouraging our nation's emerging leaders and advocating for the values of freedom.
Project 2025 was at the time called the Presidential Transition Project. Scott, the senator from Florida, was endorsed by Trump in 2023 and is currently running for re-election. Trump said of Scott, "I am proud to give my complete and total endorsement to U.S. Senator Rick Scott of Florida in his bid for re-election. I have known Rick for a long time as both a businessman and great governor of Florida." So all of this begs the question, who is really in charge here? Who is really running this country? Republicans, especially MAGA Republicans, love to talk about the deep state, even though they can never seem to identify who or even what they're referring to when they say that. Just some nebulous, nefarious underground operatives. But that's exactly what Kevin Roberts sounds like to me. No one voted for him. Most people didn't even know who he was until a few months ago. People certainly weren't talking about him in the news like they are now. But an article in The Nation asked why Republicans, who presented this Project 2025 platform to the American people, suddenly seem so anxious to pretend it never happened, that it never existed. Why did Trump attempt to separate himself from the nearly 1,000-page blueprint almost as soon as it was released? The answer is simple, because people didn't like it. Perhaps the 1,000 pages were an attempt to deter people from actually reading what was in those pages, but while Trump supporters might not be big on reading, other people are. So people read it, and then those people reported on it. According to Tatish Nateta, Provost Professor of Political Science at University of Massachusetts Amherst, large majorities of Americans oppose the key pillars of Project 2025, such as the replacement of career government officials with political appointees, 68% opposed, restricting a woman's right to contraception, 72% opposed, and eliminating the Department of Education, 64% opposed. And what's scary about those few things that were mentioned in that quote is that this isn't the first time that we're hearing about him. I don't know if you all remember this, but Trump had a Secretary of Education who wanted to eliminate the Department of Education. And we already know that the extreme abortion and now contraception position of the Republican Party has been around at least since the Reagan administration. But the article in The Nation offers some consolation. It says that despite Trump's efforts to remake the Republican Party in his own image, quote, Trumpism without Trump is wildly unpopular. And J.D. Vance is a perfect example of this. Once a never Trumper, Vance applied a born-again zeal into becoming more Trumpist than Trump. The promise or danger of Project 2025 and Vance was that we would finally see a Trumpism without Trump. A Trumpism that wasn't just snarling attitude and chaotic and ad hoc executive orders, but a cohesive governing agenda. J.D. Vance shares the low approval ratings of Project 2025. And Aaron Blake from The Washington Post refers to Vance as a historically unpopular running mate, with a net favorable rating 9 points below the 538 average. But none of this matters if Trump wins in November, so go vote. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.